In this video, I'm going to talk a little around the practical technique of doing mindfulness. If you'd like to understand more around how mindfulness can help you and where it sort of fits in your broader journey, I have made a video just prior to this talking about that. But in this video, we're going to talk more around the actual practice itself, the technique, and really guide you through starting your own mindfulness practice. So really with mindfulness, I use the word mindfulness. In other words, what we want to do is we want to use our sensory organs, which just happen to all kind of mostly be around our head. And I think that's often where we can be a little confused because we are so attached to this word mind that we believe it's connected to our brains and thinking. But mindfulness is actually really using our sensory organs. So it's using our five senses. And if, for instance, I once read this and I really love this example, if your eyes were actually each on your kneecap, so an eye on each kneecap, and you imagined yourself walking down the road, your experience would now be from a much lower location within your body. It would actually come from your eyes, which would be at your knees. It wouldn't come from the head. So the very, very first thing is to really get over our use of the word mindfulness being attached to our thinking brain when it comes to a meditation practice. So really what we're doing with mindfulness is we are just really activating and strengthening our five senses. So really, just to step us through it, I mean, we all know this, but the key five senses, so we've got our sense of sight, we've got hearing, we've got taste, we've got smell, and we've got the sensation of touch or feeling. Now, ultimately, when we go on a mindfulness journey, we will get to a point where we can, at the same time, be aware of all five senses. But for most of us, when we're starting out, that's really, really hard. So we just start to use one sense at first, and slowly we add on and build from there. Now, the sense that is the easiest, in my experience, and having worked with a few people on this, to really get into this practice is the sense of hearing. So if you can for a moment imagine the horizon, the landscape stretched out around you in all directions, and just as you would kind of visually see that landscape, you can also hear that landscape, and we call that the soundscape. So on the soundscape, we have sounds which are a lot closer to us, a little further out, and then quite far off into the distance. Now, like with some animals, for instance a dog, they can hear sounds on the soundscape a lot further out than we can in a different frequency. So of course we're just working within the range that we all individually have. It's not about really mastering our sense of hearing to the point where we're trying to force ourselves to hear sounds that wouldn't be natural for us to hear in the first place. So really the best way to begin your practice is simply to take a time in your day. It can be 30 seconds in any context. It could be while you're sitting in the traffic and maybe a bit bored. It could be lying in bed, it could be at work, it could be right now even while we're doing this video. And just to really start playing around and getting to know your sense of hearing in a much better way. So if we start right now, we want to start with the furthest sound that you can hear. So I'll keep quiet for a moment and just take a few seconds to really stretch yourself and to identify the furthest sound on the soundscape. Okay. For me, right now, I'm in a very, very quiet location, so it's pretty hard to do this. And the primary sound is the sound of the stream running outside my study. But I can hear birds, and that probably is the most distant sound right now I can hear. So note the most distant sound, and now come a little closer and listen for what is your next closest sound, and then come a lot closer and listen to what I would say right now is your primary sound. So in that example, my primary sound right now would be the stream, It's pretty loud, but there are lots of other sounds. There can be the sounds of maybe the fridge, a printing machine if you're in an office environment. There could be the hum of any sort of electrical equipment, of traffic in the distance, birds or insects. And also don't forget to think about the sounds that your own body makes. So perhaps while you're trying to keep quiet and still, you're breathing slightly heavy, you can hear your breath quite audibly. Pay attention to all those sounds. So I'll keep quiet again for a few seconds and go again from the most distant sound and bring it right back to yourself, and then identify which of those sounds is your primary sound. Okay, in doing this again for me, I could now pick up the sound of my refrigerator in the kitchen, and I could pick up the sound of my dog who's sleeping here on the floor in my study, her breathing, my own breathing, the stream outside, birds, many, many sounds. And as you get better and better at this, you'll start to pick up sounds which you honestly would never ever have heard before, because we're so conditioned to not notice things. And we are so quick to label things that we're also not always truly listening. So now for the next part of the exercise, what I'd like you to do is to identify your primary sound. So for me, this was the stream. And to once again listen to your primary sound. It might have changed. Right now, your primary sound might have become something different. Listen to your primary sound again and understand what are the different types of sounds that are involved within that sound. Because again, with labeling, it's very easy for us to say the sound of a stream, it's the sound of a stream, but what actually is the sound of a stream? There's some high-pitched noises with the sound of a stream, there's like a gurgling noise. What is the frequency? Is it high? Is it low? Is it soft? Is it loud? What does it actually sound like? Not what do you think it sounds like, what does it actually sound like? So take a listen again and see if you can unpack the music that's behind your primary sound. Interesting, right? it's it's a it's a different experience when we start to listen through fresh ears and to really start to pay attention to the little details that are all around us, but often our experience just washes over and our brain takes over and labels something, the sound of breathing or the sound of a stream or the sound of birds. But to really hear it through new ears it's a very fun and enlivening experience. And this is for me where mindfulness actually becomes quite addictive, because especially if you're doing it in a situation where perhaps you've got time or you're a bit bored or sitting in the traffic, and you start to just notice so many more things, and an entire different experience of life opens up to you. And I think this is where artists and photographers, musicians are so talented, is that they notice things that other people don't notice. And if you look at, for instance, a really good photographer, they're able to take a scene, which all of us look at all the time, such as an ocean landscape, but really capture it in a unique way, a way that perhaps we haven't seen it before. Now, we can all do that when we start to practice mindfulness, and we can all start to see everything around us in different ways. So today we've just thought about the sense of hearing, but we can now start to practice exactly what we've just done with hearing with each of our different senses. So what I would recommend is doing them as separate sessions. So have one session where you do some hearing, just as quick as we've done it now. Have another where you say do taste. Taste and smell work quite nicely together, although it's also nice to practice them completely separately. So perhaps while you have your first coffee of the day or have a coffee break during your day, use that time to really just notice smell. Notice what are all the smells you can smell, what is the primary smell, and then try to unpack those smells. Same with the sense of taste. And you can then do that. The best way for me to do the sensory feeling on the body, the sense of touch, is actually in the shower. It's a wonderful place to practice because you can feel the water, you can feel different temperatures, and it's really a wonderful environment for us to just have a very mindful shower. It's great. And you can even include that the sense of smell can start to come in. And this is how we start to combine our senses as we do mindfulness, is that while you're in the shower and you're feeling the water, you can smell this, perhaps the scent of your soap or your shampoo, and then perhaps you hear the sound of the water on you in the shower, but you can hear the birds outside as well. And in that way you can start to really weave in your experience and bring in more and more. The sense that we often struggle with the most in mindfulness is sight. And that's because we are so overly identified with our sense of sight. It's like the primary sense we use to guide us in our lives. And so very often to be mindful with our seeing can be quite tricky. So with sight, I would tend to practice the other things first, get better at that, and then start to mindfully look. And in the previous video, I shared a great example which I find really easy, which is to start to pay attention to trees and leaves, foliage, and to notice things. For instance, how does a certain leaf look in the sunlight, and what is the shape, what is the silhouette, what happens when sunlight filters through a window, looking at all different aspects of light and sight. You can really mindfully start to connect with your sense of sight. But it might be the one for you that isn't as easy, just because we are so good at, we're not truly seeing with our eyes, we're seeing with our brain, and our brains immediately give us the picture of what it is that we want to see and gives us the context and the information that we need. So we don't often see things how they really are. So I challenge you to start having small snippets in your day where you practice with sight, and then in time you can really start to weave sight into the rest of your mindfulness practice. I hope that this video has been helpful in some way, and I'd love to hear from you. What sense do you find the easiest? What do you struggle with the most? If you have any questions or any cool experiences of things that you've noticed when you are being more mindful and how that's helped you in any way. Cheers for now. Have a great day.